top 10 recruiting class again here in 2022, despite, of course, the typical fallout after there's a coaching transition. A lot of Sooner fans very worried for a couple of weeks about maintaining and holding ground. Your thoughts and impressions of Brent Venables and what he was able to do to maintain this top 10 class.
Yeah, well, it really is remarkable, Mark, when you think about the fact that, just consider for a moment the programs across the country that you would term blue bloods or at least regular powerhouses, right? And among those programs, the ones that had turnover in the coaching staff this particular season, or off season rather, you have OU and USC. Obviously, you also have Florida and Miami. And Oklahoma closed the 2022 cycle with the number 8 recruiting class in the country. That's unheard of for a program that undergoes such a massive change across the coaching staff, and particularly the loss of a head coach. Now, you look at USC, Florida, and Miami, those are 3 schools that were barely sniffing the top 20 in the overall recruiting rankings per our 24/7 sports composite rankings. So for Oklahoma to land at number 8 when all this is said and done is pretty darn miraculous, Mark. And it's even more remarkable when you consider the fact that after Riley departed, OU had fallen as low as 21st in those rankings. And so the effect that Brent Venables and his staff had in an immediate sense on this program's capacity to recruit some of those targets down the stretch in 2022 that were still uncommitted or maybe were committed elsewhere and not entirely sold on their destination. Mad props to not only Venables, but his offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby, who earned commitments from quarterback Nick Evers and wide receiver Jaden Gibson, both of whom were formerly committed to Florida within 5 days of taking the job as Oklahoma's new OC. Miguel Chavis, and that was a hire that a lot of people kind of turned their heads sideways at when Brent Venables decided to bring Chavis from an off-field role at Clemson into his first on-field coaching role as the defensive ends coach at Oklahoma. 3 of their 4 new additions on National Signing Day, new commitments, came from blue-chip players that Miguel Chavis primarily recruited to the University of Oklahoma. And obviously, Brent Venables was involved in that process. Todd Bates was involved in that process to a certain extent, but the impact that Miguel Chavis had on the Sooners' defensive recruiting down the stretch cannot be overstated. So all in all, it's really about as good as you could have realistically had it as far as recruiting down the stretch for Oklahoma in the class of 2022. And now you have some momentum to build off going into the class of 2023, where Oklahoma is expected to once again have a top 10 class and maybe even a class that surpasses their 2022 class in terms of their overall rankings in the 24/7 sports composite.
Yeah, you could also throw Brian Kelly's transition to LSU into that collection of teams. And the one difference with Oklahoma would be you have a first-time head coach heading up that process versus the other examples you gave. And Oklahoma ranked higher than all of those schools. And also a coaching transition of very different coaches. And I think that may have also been a challenge for Brent Venables because of the defensive prowess that he obviously stacks his reputation on versus Lincoln Riley, and losing a certain type of player because Brent Venables has a reputation on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it was very much a different flavor, isn't it? You have an offensive mastermind like Lincoln Riley walk out the door, and you replace him with arguably the most successful defensive coordinator in college football over the last 2 decades in Brent Venables. So I think the bottom line there is you're going to start to see Oklahoma recruit a different type of player in a general sense than Lincoln Riley was able to recruit. And I think the philosophy is also going to shift quite a bit, because with Venables, you heard it last week when he held his press conference with members of the media in the aftermath of National Signing Day. He said, look, you can't hide weakness up front, both on the offensive line and the defensive line. That's a weakness that you're not going to be able to conceal. Now, Lincoln Riley's MO was very much to build his team from the inside out, in a sense, where you recruit elite skill position players, put less of a focus on the trenches, and then hope that high-scoring offenses and turnover-heavy defenses are going to be able to lift you to Big 12 championships, college football playoff berths, eventually that elusive national title. Whereas for Brent Venables, it's going to be you recruit hard and solid on the offensive line and the defensive line, and that's your priority. And the 5 stars that you're pursuing, the elite blue chip guys, probably are going to be guys that can impact the game in the trenches for you.